Welcome to episode 41 of the Rockies Now podcast. We are a Colorado Rockies podcast. You can follow us at Rockies Now on all of your favorite social media platforms: Facebook, X, Instagram, and the Threads page. I'm your host, Steven, and along with me is co host Tom. Tom, hope you had a great Thanksgiving, and how's your day going?
I did have a good Thanksgiving. Hope you did the same. It's going pretty well. We are starting to have some snow down here in Chicago. We had our first snowfall on Sunday, so the weather is definitely changing down here. How about yourself?
Doing good. Did you do your Black Friday shopping yet? I'm assuming you did.
I did a little bit. I actually bought a brand new camera for that I will use for when we start
hmm
doing our
Yep.
our live video
Sweet.
podcasts.
Awesome. Yeah, I did a little bit of Black Friday shopping. I only got one thing. It was a T-shirt. Nowadays, of course, I buy my own things. But for Christmas, I was like, you know what? I need to buy a T-shirt, a Star Wars T-shirt. So I went out there and got a pretty good deal on Black Friday. And then for Christmas, I was, I need a baseball glove. So I haven't ordered one yet. So I'm waiting for some of the prices to drop because I know sometimes, Amazon they'll come out with newer better deals later on in the holiday season. But we'll see. But yeah, Black Friday was pretty good. Got that. Yeah, when you talked about the snow, got some snow for Thanksgiving here in Colorado. I think my house got about 5, 6 inches, so that was fun. Got us in the festive mood for Christmas. Uh, Obviously, had my turkey coma, lasted for several hours, so that was fun, enjoyable to spend time with family, and hopefully, all of our listeners that are listening had a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday with friends and family. If you celebrate Thanksgiving, um, let's talk some baseball today on the podcast. We have a lot of a lot of stuff to talk about, really, honestly. Like there's stuff coming up. Obviously, next week is the winter meetings. That should be fun. The Rule 5 draft. We're going to talk about that and the draft lottery. That's going to be coming up next Tuesday at 3:30 Mountain Time, which would be 5:30 Eastern Time. And then of course we'll talk a little bit about some more MLB signings and trades that have happened since the last time we talked on the podcast. So starting off with number one, let's talk about the Hall of Fame ballot, which came out a couple weeks ago. There's some newer faces in there. Obviously, we're not going to go huge in depth on this, but let's just talk about some of the players that we kind of picked that we could kind of see get in the Hall of Fame this year, or at least if we were given a ballot and we were part of the Writers Association, who would we basically vote for? So, um, Tom, I'll have you go first and just give us some of your selections on who you picked for this year's Hall of Fame ballot.
Well, we did have a excuse me. We did have a quite a few. Hang on one second.
hmm
Sorry, I just have a little bit of a dry throat tonight.
Oh, yeah, good.
Okay, so last year it was a bit. God, it was just it irked me a little bit that Todd Helton just missed getting in on the Hall of Fame ballot last year. And some of the new additions are very intriguing. You've got obviously former Rockies. You got Matt Holliday. You got Matt Holliday joining the bunch. David Wright, Captain America from the Mets. Chase Utley, former Philly, and also his middle infield team battery mate Jimmy Rollins is still on the ballot. Um, there's a lot of intriguing options here to choose from for anybody. But if I had a vote from the players who were still on from last year and the new ones this year, I would only pick three if I had a vote. Number one, Todd Helton. I think he rightfully has earned the right to be in Cooperstown. I don't, for all the diehard Rockies fans, I don't need to rattle off much on his stats. The one thing I think it works for him, he had a great career. He was with one team his entire career, 17 years, is phenomenal career WAR of 61.8. The one thing obviously people say with a career Rocky that works against him is, of course, they say the quote unquote Coors Field effect. I think Larry Walker finally put the what's the word I'm looking for? The doubters when it comes to that factor to red. Even though he didn't play his whole career at the Rockies, he is allowed to pave the way for other future Rockies to get in. But when you look at Todd Helton's stat line, the one thing is you should pay attention to when looking for park adjusted stats is OPS plus. 100 is league average. He had a career OPS plus of 133, which to me definitely I think works for him in turning down the Coors Field effect, having effect on his statistics. I will say, if people are complaining about the Coors Field effect, well, we should be more concerned about the tainted stats of the steroid users. And there's quite a few that are still on the ballot right now, from A-Rod to Manny Ramirez, and even Gary Sheffield, who was linked to the Balco scandal. So anyway, I'm just going on a tangent there.
Mhm.
The one guy for sure, Todd Helton, I believe this would be the year he finally gets in.
Mhm.
He definitely has earned the right to be enshrined in Cooperstown. Number 2 is the guy who finished last year, percentage of the ballot right behind him. That is Billy Wagner. He had a very good career. Obviously, when people think of greatest closers of all time, you think Mariano Rivera, you think Trevor Hoffman, the 2 all-time saves leaders. But when you look at Billy Wagner's career, he had 16 major league seasons. He pitched a total of 903 innings as a reliever. He had a total career saves of 422. This is a crazy stat that I never knew this much about him. In 903 career innings pitched, he had 1,196 strikeouts. That's
Yeah.
for a reliever, that's quite an impressive number. And of
Mhm.
course, a career ERA of 2.31, an ERA plus of 187. I for sure think he should be in Cooperstown and Shrine in the Hall of Fame. And I'm going to go one. There's one guy who's new to the ballot who I think should be in the Hall of Fame. He's one of the. He has quite. If you actually go on YouTube and you type in his name and then some funny moments, he has quite a few amusing moments
Mhm.
on the field. That's
Yeah.
Adrian Beltre.
Absolutely.
I think he had a reliable bat he hit for a good average. He was able to get on base, especially late in his career. He had a bit of underrated power. He had in hold on, in 19 career major league seasons, he had 353 home runs and a career OPS of 793. He was a well-rounded hitter, and he was, along with his personality, he was a great leader. He and he was always a guy who was a solid veteran presence. And like I said, if you type in YouTube Adrian Beltre funny moments, there's a lot of funny moments. One of my favorites is when he was in the batter's box. He stepped off to the side a little bit so he can get a better view of the pitcher throwing to the plate. And the umpire, it wasn't Joe West. I can't remember who it was. Told him, "Hey, get back in the box. Get back in the box." And Belcher said, "Okay." So he grabbed the batter's box and moved it over to where he was standing, and the umpire threw him out of the game.
Yeah.
Oh, I guess some umpires just don't have a sense of humor. But
No.
anyway, but yeah, Beltre in 19 seasons, he had a career WAR of what was it here? I have it in front of me. 93.5, which is excellent because, again, not just he had good career numbers at the plate, but he was a very solid defensive third baseman. So I definitely think Adrian Beltre. If I had a vote, I would vote him along with Billy Wagner and Todd Helton into the Hall of Fame class of 2024.
Yeah, when you talked about those funny moments, there was that other one where he was in the infield and Elvis Andrews, who was a longtime shortstop,
Yeah.
like they were just best friends. You could tell it, and I think it was kind of sweet seeing it when when Adrian Beltre had his retirement ceremony. You could see that he got emotional. I mean, it was just those two guys. They just cracked everyone up. Even if you weren't a Rangers fan, it's just those two guys just cracked you up whenever you watch the highlights or watch Rangers baseball. But that one play where it was a pop up and Andrews caught it and Beltre was just still looking up in the sky and just like that was just I just love that guy and yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you. And actually, I'll start off with Adrian Beltre. I have him marked on my list. I think, looking at that generation, this is, playing for the Red Sox, then going to the Dodgers, I think he first started out with the Dodgers, then went to Boston, and then went to Texas.
Yes.
Um, he for his generation was arguably one of if not the greatest third baseman of that generation.
Mhm.
Just the numbers he put up and just even the defensive numbers and not to mention former Rockies third baseman Nolan Arenado. He mentioned that he looked up to Adrian Beltre a lot. He looked at his videotapes. He kind of emulated some of his stuff. His defense kind of learned from him a little bit and for Nolan Arenado to do that, it tells you that clearly, Beltre deserves to be a Hall of Famer. In my opinion, he should be a first ballot Hall of Famer,
Mhm.
100%. And it just the way he just played every single day and the longevity too. I mean, he played very up until like, close to his 40s, if not, I think close to his 40th season. But just the longevity of it, and I think there's other aspects to okay, how is this guy a Hall of Famer? How like why is he a Hall of Famer? I think definitely longevity has to do with it, but just not even that, but just the numbers he put up and the OPS numbers and the home runs, the power that he had. It was just unbelievable. And I think there were even times where he wasn't getting enough love, enough some love from a lot of people around baseball and writers and all that. So, but I think he definitely should be a first ballot Hall of Famer. I think definitely has a chance to get in this year. But if not this year, for sure, I would imagine he'll get in the next couple of years.
And just to put it in perspective, he retired at the age of 39.
39. Okay, yeah, almost 40. So great, like another, a solid player that made a huge impact for a lot of people in baseball today. So I have him on my list. So I have actually okay. So that's the first of six I have. So I have six players. Second one
And
I have.
and sorry,
Okay,
one more thing, just
yeah,
to correct what I said earlier. It was actually 21 seasons, not 19. Sorry for my
okay,
little
21 seasons. Man,
sorry. That was
oh, you're good.
my mistake earlier. So go
Oh,
ahead.
you're
Sorry.
good. Yeah. So 4 seasons more than Todd Helton. And of course, number two, I'm voted for Todd Helton. For him to, again, 17 seasons for one team is something you don't really hear about in baseball, right? There's only a handful of players that have, played for 13, 14, 15 seasons. Joey Votto, he's played so many years with Cincinnati, and now he's a free agent, which is kind of hard to believe. But especially as a baseball fan, that I remember when Joey Votto was, he won the MVP back in the 2010s, and how great he was and how solid he's been throughout his career. And you're looking at a first ballot Hall of Fame there. But Joey Votto, as a matter of fact, I saw a video on YouTube where he was talking to somebody this past season, how when he was younger, when he was starting to come up through the minor leagues, he looked at videos of, Ted Williams, or at least look at some of the stats of Ted Williams. And then he looked at videos of Todd Helton and, Chipper Jones and other first basemen. And, if for him to do that means a lot. But going back to Todd Helton, Todd Helton, he gets obviously, you talked about it already, and a lot of us Rockies fans already know about the Coors Field hate and saying, "Oh, he played at Coors Field." Well, you can make the argument. It's like, okay, well, if these writers say, well, he played in Coors Field and he deserves to not get in the Hall of Fame, or deserves all this hate from these New York writers, then why did you create a baseball team? Why does Colorado have a baseball team then? Right? Colorado has a baseball team. They should have every single right to have players get awards and get in the Hall of Fame, right? And it just the Coors Field biasness is a joke. It really is. And not to mention, people don't talk much about how it is so difficult to play there. In the altitude where your body just it crumples down a lot more than you play on at sea level, right? And then when go on the road away from Coors Field, you know, the players, they have to readjust to the strike zone. They have to readjust to pitching, how like pitches move. It's extremely difficult. It's the hardest place to play baseball at Coors Field. It really is. I mean, you're playing at a much bigger stadium, less oxygen, and so it's harder on your body to play there. And for Todd Helton to do that for 17 seasons, and who a player in his last few seasons had some injuries, and for him to put up still solid numbers, it just goes to show you that Todd Helton should be a Hall of Famer. And it's just kind of shocking how he's been on the ballot for at least 5 or 6 seasons now, and he's still not in. And last year he got close. He was, I believe, 72%. I think he was just 3% shy of getting in. And I do think that he'll have a chance, very good chance of getting in this year. But it's really stupid that he's not in already. And it's just that I wouldn't be surprised that he'll still get a little bit more hate this year. But I do think that he has a very solid chance of getting in this year. Just I watched him ever since I was 7, 8, 9 years old. And when he was still in his very good seasons of his career. And I just, for me, not only because I'm a Rockies fan, but just the numbers he put up on the road. You look at his road OPS. It's some of his road stats are even better than his stats at home. So Todd Helton for me is an easy Hall of Famer. Number three, Bobby Abreu, picked him. I know some of these players that I'm going to be picking on the ballot are guys that really didn't have huge moments, you know, in the postseason, or they weren't World Series champions, or they didn't win a whole lot of MVPs or certain awards. But I think Bobby Abreu, he definitely should get in my opinion. Andrew Jones, I think he should get in. Just again with some of these names that I've on that like I'm looking at right now, is just like, how is that guy not in the Hall of Fame? Andrew Jones is a Hall of Famer for me. Next guy is a longtime catcher who played all of his years with the Twins, and that's Joe Mauer. Arguably one of the best catchers in baseball for his generation. He won an MVP in the American League, and uh, again, one of the best catchers I think a lot of people have seen in a long time, and I think he definitely deserves to get in a Hall of Fame. Maybe not this year, but I think he'll definitely get in. And then one more player, I'm going to go with Billy Wagner with Houston. When he played with Houston, he was unbelievable, just one of the best closers in baseball. And when he was with the Astros in his career, and it just, and he made some remarkable. I think he made some records there as well in terms of saves. And you know, during that generation, there was obviously you had you know with a lot like Mariano Rivera, and then you had Hoffman in San Diego, and so yeah, it just there's a lot of these players. I could pick more. I mean, there's another couple other people that were like, they're kind of close, but um, that's my Hall of Fame ballot. There's a lot of players that I think definitely deserve to get in, but I think that's who I'd vote for. But if I had to pick one or two to say what they're going in this year, I think it's going to be Todd Helton, and I'll probably go with Adrian Beltre.
Yeah, I also think some of the other people in this list who have a chance, just not this year. I do believe Maurer, he has a legit chance. Chase Utley has this legit chance.
Hmm.
David Wright too is someone to consider. I would say Bartolo Colon's a big maybe. As far as the new guys on the ballot, I just don't think any of them are gonna. The only one who has a chance to get in on his first year is Adrian Beltre. So,
Hmm.
a couple of people I guess who I think will drop off the ballot. I think my one of my favorite pitchers of all time, Mark Burley from the White Sox, and also the Blue Jays and the Miami Marlins. I'm not sure he's going to get enough to stay on the ballot. I'm not sure about K Rod Francisco Rodriguez, even though he had a solid career as a relief pitcher. It's strange he's so low, but he was only his second year on the ballot. This will be his third. Wait, no, this will be his second year on the ballot. Excuse me. And I'm not sure if Torrey Hunter is going to be able to muster enough votes to stay on the ballot, even though he had a solid career for various teams. I'm not sure about him. But yeah, I only think three are going to get in, but there's plenty of people on this list who have a chance. But there's of course players in this list who I think who have zero chance. And I think I named a couple of them, and there's a few that I didn't name that also, for non-steroidal reasons, I think are going to be shunned from the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, it would be awesome to see Matt Holliday somehow, get
Yeah,
that 5%. And I talked about this and I tweeted this out a couple weeks ago on my personal Twitter page or X page. I talked about how Matt Holliday, still to this day, I think a lot of people, our listeners, have heard that growing up, and still to this day, Matt Holliday was my all-time favorite player. And it would be so awesome and cool to see him get past that 5% and get into the Hall of Fame eventually. But it just, and I think we talked about this last week when before we went live. Um, I think Holiday belongs in the Hall of Very Good.
Mhm.
I don't think he has and plus you're looking at the New York writers, they would probably knock him off for those 6 years in Colorado and saying, oh, he played in Coors Field. But you look at his numbers in St. Louis, he almost was even better in St. Louis when he was with the Cardinals, won a World Series there in 2011. And it just, I think it will be close, but I don't think he'll be able to. I could see him getting past 5%. I just don't think he'll be able to make it long after. I don't think he's going to get a lot of votes just because, people are going to look at that, Colorado, for those 6 years and say he played Coors Field product. Uh, but you look at his numbers. I mean, during the 2000 from 2000, I think was it 2006 to 2010 or 2011, he
Mhm.
was I think he was. I saw a stat the other day or like a chart. I think he was. I want to say he was in the top 15 or top 10 in a number of seasons during that time of being in the MVP conversation. Obviously, we know that in 2007, there's an argument there that he should have won the National League MVP. But Holiday was just arguably one of the best players in baseball from that period of time. And of course, as he got older, he, his numbers went down. But he got on base, and that's one of the things he did really well. He got on base, had a good average. His slugging was good. Good home run numbers. It's just, I just think with maybe the years a little bit, but also it just, I don't know. They're not those. I mean, he's again very good player, but I just don't think it would be enough for him to get carried on over to the other side of the Hall of Fame ballot to where he can get in.
Yeah, I agree to the point. Just like I made a comment on our previous podcast about Mark Burley, he's also in the Hall of Fame of very good.
Mhm.
Which and I think we both can agree there's a difference between being very good and being somebody who was, I don't want to say legendary status, but was, I guess you can say, elite.
Yeah.
Though at some point, those two, Mark Burley and Matt Holliday, were elite. Again, you highlighted his 2007 season where he finished second in the MVP race in the National League for the Rockies. At some points, he was elite, and of course, he had phenomenal years in St. Louis. It's not like his years at the Rockies were the only highlights of his career. I mean, heck, even during his 93 games with the Oakland A's in 2009, he had an OPS of 831 and OPS plus of 120 in 93 games. So it's not like he needed Coors Field to pad his stats, quote unquote. He was an elite guy for St. Louis, and he helped them win a World Series. So that's the thing that I still think he had a very good career, and it's going to be interesting to see how his son does with the Baltimore Orioles. But ultimately, I think he'll garner some votes, but I don't think it's going to be enough to eventually keep him on the ballot and get him into the Hall of Fame. But he will be, like you said, for you and myself, I think a lot of fans out there, he's in the Hall of Fame of very good.
Mm-hmm. Moving on to our second segment, but actually before we get to that, so anyways, for those who are listening, if you have any thoughts on the Hall of Fame, if you have your own Hall of Fame ballot, you can drop that down in the comments below, whether you're on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, just like DMS, let us know. We would like to see some of your comments and some of your feedback there. So yeah, let's move on to some of the MLB signings and trades that have happened since we last talked to you guys. The D-backs, they got a trade with the Mariners, and like they did this past year with Rojas, and they got Paul Sewald from the Mariners. And I mean, for me, if I was a Mariners fan, I wouldn't be too happy about this because you're trading away a pretty solid third baseman in Suarez, and I think a lot of the fans loved Suarez in Seattle, and the Seattle Mariners in return they get Sebi Zavala and Carlos Vargas, and the D-backs they got a third baseman. Excuse me, they got a third baseman, and I know heading into the offseason there were rumors that maybe they might get Matt Chapman or who are they going to get third base, like other players like that. But I think looking at the D-backs lineup going into next year is pretty darn good. And for Seattle, it's just like I really don't like what they have been doing so far this offseason. Personally, for me, I love to see them just out of nowhere get Ohtani. I think that would be great. But I mean, I really don't know. It just if I was a Mariners fan, I feel it's like, what are they doing? I guess. It just I don't know if they are going to be able to compete like they did this past year. They have some work to do, obviously, but and definitely for sure they should absolutely be a part of the free agency this offseason. But I think the D-backs got a pretty good player in this trade.
They did, and maybe in a White Sox fan, I can say Sepi Zavala is a capable backup catcher. He's not going to be the starter, obviously, but he is a guy who pitchers like working with. He's a capable defender. He's not a great hitter, but again, he'll be the backup catcher or a depth piece. He's not an everyday catcher. So in that regard, the Mariners, I think, got a piece in that regard. But it wouldn't surprise me, as you point out, if they're in on Matt Chapman. I'm looking at their prospect list. They don't have any top third base prospects who could come up and replace Eugenio Suarez at that spot. So they're going to be looking for a third baseman. It is interesting. Of course, 2 years ago, they made the playoffs for the first time in over 2 decades. And people think, oh, they're just kind of whittling and whatever. Well, they've got quite an uphill battle to climb because the Rangers just won the World Series. The Astros are still formidable. They're not the Astros they used to be, I think. I think they're kind of on the downturn, and they've got some big decisions to make when it comes to guys such as Bregman and Altuve, who Personally, I think they're going to let Bregman walk eventually, but I think Altuve could be a lifetime Astro. That's my personal opinion. And then, I mean, really nobody has to worry about the Oakland A's. They're just kind of doing their own thing or whatever. That's a whole other mess. It's another conversation. But yeah, the Mariners, I think they're one of those teams, I guess you could say, that are staying rather quiet. I don't hear a lot of rumors about them being in on many people. If they're in on Ohtani, that's obviously being kept under wraps. But we'll see. And I can say, yeah, the Diamondbacks, Evan Longoria was a solid veteran for them at third base, but Eugenio Suarez is a upgrade for them to add some more firepower to that position. He is a capable defender, so that's good for them. So like I said, the Diamondbacks aren't just sitting on their hands, just kind of quote unquote running it back. They've already made one upgrade in that regard. And for the Mariners, as I've said before, they got Robbie Ray coming back, and who knows? Maybe they are ready to make a big splash, whether it's a big trade or a big free agent signing. Wink, wink. Shohei Ohtani, I hope. But
Yeah.
that's my dark horse pick. But anyway,
Mhm.
we'll see how that trade works out for both of them.
Yeah, next guy that went someplace else, and that's a guy that I think some Rockies fans kind of wanted to see him come to Denver, maybe for a 1 year deal, but that was Kenta Maeda. He's going to the
Mhm.
Twins for 2
Mhm.
years.
Yeah,
Uh,
the
yeah,
Tigers actually.
oh, Tigers, excuse me. For
He
some
was
reason,
he was with the Twins.
okay, he's with the Twins. He's going to the Tigers. I think I looked at his. Oh, okay. I was looking at his, his picture on MLB transactions. I was like, oh, he's going to the Twins. But yeah,
Right.
so he's going to the Tigers. My mistake. So those who are listening, he's going to the Tigers, not the Twins. So I think the Tigers, they got a pretty decent pitcher. I mean, he's old, he's a little older. And the Tigers, they need some pitching. Obviously, they're most likely not going to get Eduardo Rodriguez back, but the Tigers need pitching. Obviously, if they want to kind of turn this thing around and kind of get back into being a competitive team again, they need pitching. And they have some pieces in that lineup. Spencer Torkelson is going to be a pretty solid player for them.
Mhm.
And there's even rumors that they might be in Matt Chapman and some other ball players, but um, and I think there's even rumors that they might even be willing to trade Javier Baez, which I think they should absolutely do because
Oh boy.
he hasn't. It's not gone well for the Baez show in Detroit. So I'm happy for Tigers fans. It's just like I mean, I hope Maeda does well. It's just that I mean, maybe it's just a depth piece because I do know that I think they have Matt Boyd, as their main ace over there in Detroit. So maybe Maeda is going to be kind of like a guy, like a starter, or kind of like how the Rockies are going to do this year. Kind of get a guy that can eat up some innings, and a guy that has done pretty well in his career pitching wise. And I think Maeda is kind of a good safe pick for the Tigers here. And I think I'm okay with it. I mean, I think it's a good signing for the Tigers for 2 years, and and maybe he'll kind of help them get back into relevancy, I guess, in that AL Central division that's kind of weak right now with the Guardians and the White Sox. They're on their way
Mhm.
up a little bit,
Mhm.
and then you have the Royals who are still rebuilding right now. So I guess we'll see what happens there. But yeah, Maeda's going to the Tigers for 2 years.
Yeah, I think they're just making small veteran upgrades here. The Tigers, they've got some talent that is showing some promise last year, specifically Spencer Torkelson, as you mentioned, did have specifically a good second half after adjusting to him. In terms of the rotation, Kenta Maeda is definitely a veteran innings eater who can add some um, some veteran presence to eat up in plenty of innings. He's not going to be the ace that belongs to they still have uh um they're still high on Casey Mize. He has not really truly figured it out yet, but they're still very high on him. They're hopeful he can still be their ace. Terrence Skubal, shout out to Herb Lawrence and Sean Anderson of the CHGO White Sox podcast for that little moniker on his last name.
Mhm.
He is the guy with in the rotation who I think is going to be heading it for now as the main lefty. But yeah, I mean, they also added Mark Canha recently, another veteran upgrade. The Tigers, I think they're just trying to kind of inch up a little bit, unless they make a big splash coming soon. Uh, Javier Baez, good luck trading that contract. There is no way you're trading that.
Yeah.
Not to be critical or whatever, but I got one of my best friends who's a diehard Cub fan said it best about him. His style as a hitter does not age well. He doesn't
Yeah.
situational hit. He just swings that bat as hard as he can at every single pitch, hoping to catch one. So he's a good defender and a professional, but at the same time, I think that was a panic signing. The Tigers felt the
Yeah.
need. Alavita felt he needed to make a splash, and they lost out on Carlos Correa, reuniting him with AJ Hinch. But the Tigers, they'll make some noise. The Twins, especially not with losing Maeda, but losing another pitcher who I think we'll talk about here soon. They're losing a lot of innings. They've got to really replenish at least three pitchers in their rotation. So I'm not sure what they're going to do in that regard. And the White Sox, yeah, Paul DeYoung is just a veteran stopgap signing. And I'm sorry if we were going to talk about him, just to kind of wait until their top prospect, Colson
Mhm.
Montgomery's ready. But Kenta Maeda, it's a good little pickup for the Tigers, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, actually, the other Twins, or former Twins pitcher that is moving on to a different team, that's Sonny Gray. And
Yep.
this one kind of, okay, it didn't shock me, but because I know there were rumors that the Cardinals, obviously, they're still looking for pitching. As a matter of fact, I think the Cardinals are on Dylan Cease right now.
Yep.
They wanted in Mozeliak. He's being serious about it, and I'm happy for Cardinals fans, and I still think that they need a little bit more. I think that if they want to be serious about, hey, we're gonna try to win the Central this year, because I think the Brewers are we're kind of wondering what they're going to do this offseason and going into next year. Um, because right now, I mean, heck, if the Cubs get Otani by any chance, you're looking at a Cubs team that might win the division. If the Cardinals don't, like, if the Cardinals stopped right now, I would have to give the Cubs the division here, because it's just the team and the players that they have coming up through the system, like PCA, and they have, if they bring back Bellinger by any chance, and they have Dansby Swanson,
Mhm.
and they have Patrick Wisdom, Nico Horner. The Cubs have a sneaky, very good team, and not to mention, they nearly made the playoffs this year. If it wasn't for some of that last, week or two of the season when they kind of lost some of those important games there. I think they played the Braves where they got obliterated. Um, you know, this is a good signing for the Cardinals. Very good signing. 3 years with them, and you're looking at probably their ace going into next year, unless if they get Dylan Cease. But I think right now you're looking at your number one starter on opening day here. 3 years, pretty good signing. It's not like a 5, 6, 7 year, because that's a little bit more riskier. But I like this. I like the signing for the Cardinals here. They got a guy that I think they were connected to, and they got their guy. So I do expect the Cardinals to be a little bit better next year. But again, we'll see. That rotation still is kind of concerning me a little bit. I mean, I like Sonny Gray, but the other signings, we'll have to wait and see.
It's a bit more than I would think someone would wanna pay for a guy for his age. I believe it'll be his I think he's 34 right now, just bear with me for just a
Hmm.
moment. I think he's
Yeah.
34, yeah, he's 34. It's a little high, 25 million a year, because it's evenly spaced out over the 3 years. That's a little high than what I wanna pay a player for his 34, 35, and 36 season. But he is a somewhat reliable guy. I don't He has not gone through too many injuries in his career. He does eat up innings. He is a formidable starter. He has been for a while. And I guess at this point he's their ace going into opening day, unless, like you said, they make a signing. As far as our top 10 predictions, I am 0 for 1.
Yeah, actually, I haven't checked my stats, but yeah, 0-1 for Sonny Gray for me as well. Yeah, yeah. Again,
I had him going to the Orioles, and I had Blake
mhm.
Snell going to the Cardinals, which still could happen. You never know. But
Yeah, I mean, I do expect the Cardinals. I mean, it sounds like they're like being very serious, which is, again, if I'm a Cardinals fan, I'm being very excited about this. It's like, finally we're being serious about doing something, because last year they kind of didn't do much in the offseason, and look what happened during the regular season. Not so good. Um, yeah, again, very, very solid signing for the Cardinals here.
mhm,
And so, the winter meetings, I'm sure Mozeliak is probably going to be talking to, maybe Dylan Cease's agents, and some other guys, Blake Snell as well, because Snell just came off of winning the National League Cy Young Award. So, but there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to be after him too. I mean, you're talking 29 other teams that would like him. I mean, the Rockies would like him, but they're probably not going to get him because Snell is going to get a lot of money wherever he goes to. He's
yeah,
going to get a lot of money. Same thing with Otani, but
yep.
yeah. So Sonny Gray, he's going to the Cardinals for 3 years, and then we had some signings just the other day. As a matter of fact, I think it was yesterday. Emilio Pagan and Nick Martinez are going to the Reds for 2 years. I'm very happy for the Reds, because I know a year or two ago, a lot of Reds fans were very unhappy with their owner. It just, because I remember on opening day, the owner made some comments that a lot of fans were not very happy about, and for them to actually spend money and to get solid pitchers on the market, and for them to come to Cincinnati to a team that is getting better, and they're going to have some really good team. They're going to have a really good team, I think, next year, or at least some really very good players. I mean, you're looking at De La Cruz, Spencer Steer, Matt McLean, who were both in the Rookie of the Year conversation a little bit there. Um, they're going to have a pretty darn good team next year, and I think they might even be close to a wild card spot next year. We'll see. That National League Central Division is going to get better as we move on. I like the signings here, for the Reds. They need pitching, and I think their offense is definitely going to come. But I think one of the things that they've needed for a while is pitching, and I think if they want to get back, like almost any other team, if you want to get into the playoffs, you have to get pitching, and I think this is a pretty solid move for the Reds here to kind of start the offseason for them.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and then a couple other signings today. The Mets, they got Luis Severino from I think that was a trade, if I'm not mistaken, from the Yankees. So he's moving across town. He's
Yeah,
going to the Mets.
I think it's sorry to interrupt you. I think it's only been agreed upon. It hasn't been finalized by the league
Okay, yeah. So it's been agreed, but he'll be probably one of their top pitchers because
yet.
obviously Steve Cohen, he's not going to sit on his hands and do nothing. I do like I've had a couple, like, of course, we've had a couple of comments saying, what about the Mets? What about the Mets? I still don't think they're going to do much, but they're going to make some of these smaller signings to where they're going to sign these players to 1-year deals. So maybe if things don't go well in 2024 for them, they're going to trade them at the deadline. And then they got Joey Wendell. Again, I don't think it's complete. I think it's finalized, but it's not completely finalized. But Joey Wendell is going to the Mets, and I like that signing for them. So it's not like they're making these huge splash. But I think I saw somewhere that they're also in Shohei Ohtani, but I don't think that's going to happen with the payroll that they have. It's not going to happen, and we never know. Maybe we'll see. Yeah,
With the new president of baseball operations and David Stearns coming over from Milwaukee,
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a different plan, different vision.
Yeah.
Again, it is Steve Cohen's team. He can spend his money how he wants with all that, with being the richest owner in Major League Baseball. But with Billy Epper gone, David Stearns in, it's going to be a different way of going about things. The only question is how is it going to change? I don't think it's going to be too much different than how he ran Milwaukee, but again, he's got access to a much higher payroll. But they've got some decisions to make, and then it's not like they're in any position. They're one or two guys away, and plus, also, even if they were, they got to go through the Braves and the Phillies to get to the playoffs.
Yeah,
because those are the top dogs.
Go ahead.
Top dogs in the NL East right now.
Yeah, and really, like, if for the Mets, you're looking at a wild card, like you're basically a wild card contending team, which they're probably going to do. I mean, they're not going to say, "Hey, we're going to, sit out this year." No, they're gonna play their butt off this year. But it just, you got to, like you said, you got to go against the Phillies and the Braves, which have much better rosters at the moment right now, and they're much in a better place in terms of payroll and roster construction than you are right now. And then former Rocky Garrett Hampson going to the Kansas City Royals. I like that. I'm happy for Hampy. He went to the Miami Marlins this past year for a 1-year deal. He had a Garrett Hampson season. That's not a knock on him, but hopefully he can use his wheels in Kansas City. Kansas City, they definitely could use any player. They really, any player, honestly, because they're kind of, like I said, they're kind of in that transition. Of course, Bobby Witt is their future, and it's still questionable about their pitching, but Garrett Hampson going to the Royals, happy for him. So, we're just coming up on literally days away from the winter meetings, because I think Tom, you texted me the other day. Don't they start? They start on Sunday night, but don't the owners and the GMs, they arrive on, is it tomorrow or Saturday? Or
typically, Sunday? It just depends who you are, what your schedule is. Obviously, for any GMs, typically they start arriving on Friday to get acquainted, and then they start conversation stuff on Saturday and Sunday. But the meetings don't actually start until early Monday morning.
Okay, so I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of them are already there, or are they on their way?
They're probably, well, it's Nashville. There's plenty to do in Nashville outside of meetings, but they're going to be focused on business. But it wouldn't surprise you if some have already arrived right now. But typically, they're all there by Friday or Saturday.
Yeah. Um,
I've heard so I've heard so many stories from certain guys in the media. Bob Nightingale's told a pretty couple stories about how some of those about how when you go to the winter meetings, you better be ready to get in total of those 5, 6 days about function on about 4 or 5 hours of sleep.
yeah, because like you're getting phone calls like, basically
Oh,
24/7, really, from all these different GMs.
oh, not to mention meeting in the rooms because how it's
Yeah.
explained, how I guess the setup is explained. It's interesting how they do this, or how I've been told by listening to some former executives on how the hotel arrangements and suites are divided up. If you based on your years of seniority in your position, you have dibs on, or you have the option to get the biggest suite in of all. So that by default is Brian Castron. So I guess he
Mm,
gets the biggest suite. And but I've heard stories about how guys are up until 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning having conversations in each other's rooms, talking over deals, discussing trades, and etc.
mhm,
Or there are also agents who do attend the winter meetings as well. Like Scott Boris will be there to talk to teams about his clients because he's got quite a few ones on the market right now, and also in the being talked about in trade conversations. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of activity. It's when a lot of activity tends to happen, or conversations start to pick up as far as getting deals done.
yeah. Or like when you're talking about Cashman, I was just thinking of that meme a couple years ago during the lockout where Cashman was like it was like right after the lockout ended and he was outside in his sleeping bag. I think maybe that would be his suite, I guess. Like he just like sets up a sleeping bag in the lobby there of the hotel. But yeah, I find it very interesting too, like how they do in a hotel. I think it's a great idea. Just kind of for the Christmas holiday, they had the decorations in the back, and actually, it's really cool that the fans or some people can actually go there and kind of interact and just have fun, take pictures, whatever. I think that's awesome. And like I mentioned at I think we mentioned this at the beginning of the podcast. If not, the MLB draft lottery is on Tuesday
Mhm.
at
Yep.
3:30 Mountain Time. The Rockies, Athletics, and the Royals have a 18.3% chance of getting the first overall pick. And by the way, the Rockies have never gotten a first overall pick. So if they do get that on Tuesday, that'll be the first time in Rockies history. Um, and we talked about this before too. I mean, it will definitely be exciting, but at the same time, though, you have to do your research and you have to pick the right player because you don't want to make you want to get a good player, but you never know when that player might not perform well. We've seen that before. But I think obviously with the safe pick, I think if that happens, if the Rockies do get the number one pick, they're I would imagine they're going to get college because the last time the Rockies got a guy from high school in the first round was Zach Veen in 2020. And actually, I think Drew Romo was also, but he was in the, I think it was a second round pick. He was also I think came out of high school. Where Bill Schmidt, ever since he's taken the reins in Denver as the GM, he's been very heavy college. And, occasionally he'll get a high school player. I think he drafted one or two high school players this year. Actually, I think he only drafted one high school player, something like that. I think I saw the draft, and I kind of forget. I've already forgotten, but I think it was like one high school this year, and
Mhm.
then got one or two high schools last year. But basically, other than that, everybody, all the 20 picks have basically been college pitchers or hitters or whatever. So I would imagine if the Rockies get the number one pick, they're probably going to go college route, which is the safest bet, the safest way to go because you kind of know what you got in that player, and I would imagine that's what the Rockies are going to do. Um, and I'm hoping the Rockies get it would be awesome. It would be amazing if the Rockies got the number one pick. But should they not get the number one pick, I think there's like about a 52%, 53% chance that they get a top three pick, which I'm fine with. As long as we get a top three, I'm 100% okay with that. What you don't want is you don't want to have, you don't want to move down in the draft, right? I remember last year in the draft lottery, the A's were like at number 3 or number 4, and they
Mhm.
got bumped down 3 slots to number 7. Um, and so that's what you don't want. I mean, the worst case scenario, the Rockies get bumped down to 6th or 7th, but if they get a top one, I'm super happy. Top 3, I'm happy. But if they get bumped to like 5th or lower, it won't be nice because it's just like the Rockies, they could use a generational type player. However, we still have to wait and see what the draft prospects will look like upcoming come June. Excuse me, come July. So I'm looking forward to that. And I mean, it's always neat to see that. I remember last year I watched the draft lottery for the first time. It was different,
Mhm,
and it was very it was exciting. It's like, oh man, my team had a chance. I mean, the Rockies only had a 3% chance, but there's actually a chance. There's a chance that the Royals, Athletics, or Rockies don't get the first pick, and it might be the White Sox who are right behind the Rockies, or the
mhm.
Cardinals who are, I believe, at 8%. So like that's what I like about the draft lottery. Instead of like, I like the draft lottery just simply because I agree with what some people have been talking about when they were discussing the draft lottery and bring that in, because there were teams kind of like in other sports. There's teams that tank on purpose. I don't really like that, and of course I've mentioned this on the podcast before. Is that I'm not a big fan of losing on purpose. I believe that each team should have an opportunity to do their best, but it's just I don't know. I like the draft lottery. It's kind of fun. You never know who could get the first overall pick, but I think the Rockies have a pretty decent chance of getting that number one spot.
Yeah, they do. I mean, at this point, anything, like we saw last year, anything is possible. But they do have a good chance. So we just gotta wait and see how it folds out. And I do believe also Bill Schmidt's no matter where they get between 1 through 10, I think it's gonna be a college player too.
Hmm. Yeah, and speaking of draft, we have the Rule 5 draft. Also, I forget. I don't know which day it is. All I know is sometime next week during the winter meetings. But we have the Rule 5 draft, and for those that are kind of confused about the Rule 5 draft, basically, uh, there are players. I think they were formerly on the 40-man roster, or players that
Mhm,
were kept off the 40-man roster, and basically they're available. They're kind of like a free agent. Like basically, you go through this draft and you can pick them up. And there's I think the number of players here, and of course I'm looking at MLB.com right now and just looking at some players. There might be multiple players for certain teams, but they're looking at a list of just single players, top players for each team. And as far as we know, there's only one player for the Rockies that's eligible for the Rule 5 draft, and that's Aaron Chunk, who spent this past season in AAA Albuquerque. He was drafted a few years ago. I believe he was a second round pick out of Georgia, University of Georgia. And I
yes.
remember when we drafted him, I was really excited because it was like, hey, this guy's a pretty solid infielder. Looking at some of his stats, he had some, decent power, but he was kind of known for his defense. And, Tom and I, we were kind of discussing this right before we went live, but we've seen some of the replays that he's made over the last couple of years in the minor leagues for the Rockies, and it's just very impressive. Very good defense, very good arm in the infield at third base, and the Rockies, if they lose Shunk in the Rule 5 draft, it'll be a little bit disappointing. But at the same time, though, I think Tom and I can kind of agree with this: is that the Rockies, they're not losing, a big, huge player, because the Rockies already have a number of solid infield prospects coming up through the system that can, play almost anywhere, second base, third base, first base. Warming Bernabel, I think he's on the 40-man roster right now. He might have a chance to play third base. Aaron Chunk, I just, if he stays in Colorado, awesome. If he stays in AAA, awesome. We might see him next year. As a matter of fact, I thought we had an opportunity to potentially see him this past year, but of course, with Hunter Goodman coming up and Coco Montez during the middle of the season, we never really got to see Aaron Chunk. But I just, this is not a knock on him, but I just don't see him as a big part of the future for the Rockies. Just because the Rockies already have kind of like those guys that they're like, hey, this is our future. This guy we feel like is going to be set to be our, third baseman, second baseman, shortstop. You get the idea. But Aaron Chunk, if he stays, great. If not, I'm sure another team would like to pick him up, because looking at some of his numbers, he had some pretty decent numbers in AAA. And I know Albuquerque is a hitter's ballpark, but you look some of at his OPS and his some of his defensive numbers, metrics especially. You're looking at a pretty decent infielder here. And if a team picks him up, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if a team does pick him up with some of the talent that he has when he was drafted out of Georgia.
Yeah, with a slash line of 290, 350, 461, and 811 OPS in 116 games in AAA, he'll get picked up by somebody. It's
Yeah.
just based on what the Rockies 40-man roster structure was and who was eligible. He
Mhm.
just wasn't a guy that was, just wasn't someone they were looking into protecting. Just Amador Fernandez, or Amador, I should say, was the one infielder that they had to protect for sure.
Mhm.
And they needed it, as we talked about, they need to keep spots open on the 40-man for any additions that they want to fill up as opening day as the off season starts to pick up some traction and spring training nears.
Yeah, especially if let's just say if Sterling Thompson or Jordan Beck or heck, even Zach Veen have a good spring training, they might be like,
Mhm.
"Hey, we'd like to add this guy to the 40-man roster. We need to move this guy, or we need to call down this guy, or get this guy off the 40-man roster." And yeah, you do in some certain occasions you have to put him on waivers, and generally, if you're out of options, you have to put him on waivers, or you get the idea. Like you have to do some of the stuff like that, and it's unfortunate for Aaron, and if he gets picked up, I would, I'd hate to see that happen in some ways, but at the same time, though, he'll get an opportunity somewhere else. But also, you have to look at, the Rockies. They are already set at third base for the next number of years with Ryan McMahon over there at third base. Now, there's always a possibility that Bill Schmidt will do something. He could make a trade, but I think the Rockies really like McMahon's defense. And I just don't think that the Rockies are going to move McMahon anytime soon. I'd be shocked if they do. But I think Aaron Chunk, he just wouldn't have a place on the roster, especially with some of the players that the Rockies already had right now on the bench with Montero that they need to give him playing time next year. You got to give Hunter Goodman his playing time next year. So really, you can't give Aaron Chunk, a DH spot, or you really can't put him at first base because you have kind of like a number of guys who are already there at first base, and then you can't really put him at second base because you have Trejo and Brendan Rodgers. And then you have Tovar at shortstop. So really, there's not a spot, and so you kind of have to let him go in this case.
Yeah, he's a guy that they will find someone to replace in terms of the roster for AAA Albuquerque next year. And if he continues to, like I said, he's still only 25. He'll have somebody I think will give him a shot to earn a spot for a call up. And if he does, I hope he makes the best of it. But he'll get a chance. Somebody will pick him up.
Yeah, absolutely. This will conclude this episode of the Rockies Now podcast. Please be sure to subscribe, follow, rate, and review all of our social media pages. We love hearing from all of our wonderful listeners. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the podcast. Have a great day, everyone. And as always, go Rockies.